What's up, y'all? Welcome to another edition of Define Your Legacy. All right, and before we tap into today's episode, just want to shout out our online store, which can be found in the link in the description of this episode. All right, we have t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, all of that. All right, so feel free to check out the online store and the link in the description of this episode. All right, now, without further ado, okay, we'd like to introduce our guest. We have Greer Davis on the show. How you doing, Greer? Good to see you.
One. Thank you for having me. This is really exciting. I'm nervous. I get a little nervous about this kind of stuff, but
Yeah, it's all
I'm
good. I
excited.
mean, you were mentioning that before we started recording and stuff like that. So, but I know it's going to be a good episode. For those who may not know, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us what it is that you do and everything like that.
Okay, so I'm Greer Davis. I'm 24 years old. I'm from Bloomfield, Connecticut. These and I went to early extension elementary
Yeah.
school together.
Wow.
Summer,
Yeah.
summer camp. I think I'm like 2 grades below you though,
Mhm.
something like that.
Yeah.
But up in Bloomfield, Connecticut. Went to school in Connecticut. I went to Loomis Chafee for high school, which is a town over from where we grew up, which is a boarding school, but I lived at home, so I was a day student. From there, I went to Tufts University, which is in Boston, so not too far from home, about an hour and a half. And there, I really didn't know at first what I wanted to do, had zero idea. I declared really late, to be honest.
Mhm.
And I declared as a film and media studies major, was really more on the media side. Didn't want to be in front of a camera, working with cameras, but obviously that came with it. I wrote a lot of papers on like women in sports, broadcasting, stuff like that. And then my senior year, I always say like things sometimes just fall into your lap. I was working in our university communications department, helping with like the Instagram and their Facebook. And I saw a magazine. Nobody at school really reads their school's magazine, right?
Mhm.
So I looked inside, I was just scrolling through it, and I saw that Beyonce's agent, like her talent agent, went to Tufts. Now, like
Wow.
if you think of Tufts, if you even know what Tufts is, you usually assume you're like a vet or a dentist or like
Yeah.
don't really think of anybody like an agent. So that was kind of cool. And then I want to say a few months went by, and there was through my film and media studies major, there was a internship program where you could go out to LA for like a week and you would shadow people at an agency. So I was like, first of all, I didn't know what I wanted to do after college. I knew I wanted to move, but my parents are like, you're not moving anywhere without a job. And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, let me see what I can do. So I saw that the company that the woman in the article I read worked at this one particular company. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna tie in this little
Right.
magazine
Right.
article.
Right. 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 Right.
Oh, nobody else has read this article.
Mhm.
So I ended up getting the opportunity to go to ICM Partners, which is my current employer, for a week in January of 2019. And I really kind of was like, if I come out to LA, I'm gonna make it count. So,
Mhm.
just I shadowed, for those of you who don't know, it's like a talent agency, it's kind of like a full service agency. So they have musicians, they have actors, directors, screenwriters, a branding department, podcast department now, because we kind of just evolved with the times. So
Mhm.
when I was there, they kind of asked me like, what's your thing? Like, where do you want to shadow? And I told them corporate communications, talent, so like actors, music, branding. And I think so that entire week, each day I shadowed a different agent for 5 days.
Mhm.
And I was like, no, I need to make this time count.
Yeah.
So I networked with all the assistants of every agent. Literally every person I met, I wrote their name down. And when I would get back to my hotel that night, I wrote a thank you note. I was like, oh,
Mhm.
we going old fashioned. I don't care if I'm
Mhm.
giving a 1-year-old a thank you note. Like it is what it
Yeah. Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Came back to Boston and wrote about my experience on LinkedIn. And 2 days later, they called me and were like, hey, like, we would love to offer you like a full-time job starting like in the mailroom when you graduate. I was like, oh, it's on. So I ended up moving to LA a month and a half after graduation and started working at the agency July of 2019. Started in the mailroom. It's kind of like movies that you see at
Mhm.
agencies. You just
Yeah.
rolling around a bell cart. Started at a branding desk, working for a branding agent, and his clients were brands themselves. So his biggest client's Jaguar Land Rover, which I thought was
Mm.
pretty cool. So, giving out celebrity cars, just making
Yeah.
sure like facilitating that. And then I ended up going back into the mailroom. And one of the assistants I shadowed on my internship, um, she came up to me and she ended up being my roommate moving down the line. But and she's a singer and she was like, look, like I am about to leave. Are you interested? Working for my boss. And it's a great fit. It was in concerts, which is music's probably like my number one passion. So
Mm.
I was like, oh, this is just perfect timing because I was getting a
Yeah.
little tired in the room. I was there for like 4 months. I'm like, this it has to get good at some point. Like,
Right.
uh, so I ended up working, or I interviewed for the position, and I've been there for 2.5 years now. So
Mhm.
I work for this man, Robert Gibbs. He's the current head of the music department at ICM Partners. He was just the head of the contemporary department when I began on his desk, but
Mhm.
he got promoted after. So I've been working with him for a little over 2 years now. And he's the talent agent for J. Cole, All of Dreamville,
Mhm.
Party Next Door, Roy Woods on the OVO side. And then he recently signed Sofago, who signed to Cactus Jack. He's like a little techca kind of artist.
Mhm.
And so it's been a really amazing experience, a little like confusing at times because I didn't really know what to expect. Um, and so, yeah, I'm currently a concert assistant. So what that means is literally just scheduling tours and helping with that. So all the finances on the back end of shows. And we do college shows, festivals, um, tours, and then any like other engagements. Obviously, with the pandemic, it's been a little tough.
Mhm.
But I don't know. A lot of universities were doing virtual shows for their students.
Right.
So that's kind of my whole little. It's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, yeah,
Looking to get
yeah.
promoted.
We'll speak that into existence. We'll speak that into existence.
My
Um,
word of the year is manifestation. So
mm, okay, I like that, and there's a lot to unpack in that story. But going back to even the beginning, where you first mentioned, I think you said you weren't sure what to major in, or you weren't sure which route that you want to take. So, how did you stumble upon film and media?
well, I would say just backing up even before that, the whole like college decision.
Mm.
For me, I didn't really know like where I saw myself. I didn't know if I saw myself at a big school down south on the West Coast, East Coast. I really didn't know. And all of the schools that I had on my list were predominantly bigger schools. Like I went Maryland, Syracuse, like, bigger schools. And Tufts was the most academic. Like it was a little tougher for me. I didn't know if I would get in right away. So I applied early. And I applied early because I was like, I don't know if my SAT scores are like just, putting it up in the air. And when I got accepted, I was kind of like, well, this is amazing. Like to me, the hard part is getting in. And then,
Mhm.
figuring it out, it's like a whole nother set
Yeah.
of issues. And so it was a liberal arts school. So I think that if I was at any other school, I probably would have easily just been a communications major. But since they didn't have that, it was kind of like I had to find another way to figure out what I wanted to do. Um, I knew I wanted to be in entertainment. I wasn't sure in what capacity, like music, sports, branding, because those are all like the things I care about the most. Um, so when I found about the film and media studies program, it was more the media studies part that like drew my attention. And then I realized most of the classes I already had taken were for
Mhm.
that major. So that's kind of how I came to that decision.
Yeah. And even landing the wintership. I think to be honest, that might be the first time I've ever heard that word before.
Right.
But landing that. So what? I know you said you read it, in kind of a magazine, like the birth of all that. But what made you decide to really like, I guess, go all in and try and land that opportunity during a time where you could have just, just went home and just relaxed, if you will?
Right. Well, the first thing is they were all in like cool cities. It was like LA, New York, DC. So I was like, oh, this might be a nice little way to get
Yeah.
some experience on my resume, enjoy myself. And then when I was looking at, I kind of honed in on like the LA option, and there were a bunch of agencies. So it wasn't just ICM, it was the big CAAs, WMEs, UTA, all the major agencies were on the list. But something about that story just kind of stuck with me. So that was like my first choice. And also she was a Black woman. And I was just like, I don't know, I just kind of felt some connection to the
Yeah.
story. And it's also like, to me, reading that article was the first time I really thought about being an agent, or that the agency role even existed. Like I just feel like they never came to our college fairs. It's just one of those industries you kind of, if you know, and especially not being in LA or in New York City, you don't really have as much access, or it's not really visible on LinkedIn or any of those other places. So I was really, really hoping I would get the opportunity to, meet this woman, which she ended up being my mentor through the whole thing. And I was like, I read an article about you, and that's how I got here.
Wow.
So it really came full circle. But it's funny because it's like one day I randomly picked up a magazine. It's not like, so I've tried to keep that in mind, and I always say like things are supposed to happen when they're supposed to happen.
Yeah. And I mean, a situation like that doesn't happen every day.
Right.
People like finding your something that can lead to something greater by picking up a magazine. That's not common. But even I think it was cool too. I think you mentioned in your stories that after it was over, you say like 2 days after they called you with an offer.
Yeah, well, I think it was like 2 days after I made a LinkedIn post, and I think I waited like a week. I got home, but it was pretty fast. It was pretty fast.
So how you remember when, how was your reaction? Like do you remember like when you first got the the notification?
I remember because I was like studying I think we were studying for, no, it couldn't have been studying for finals. I might have just been in the library with my friends. And I was like, I got a job. All of us are like, doing job interviews here and there, trying to work, figure out who knows who. We're all like, it's like, you think school's the hard part. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, yo, I got a job. And then I saw like, compensation. I was like, oh, but you know what? I have a job. So no, I remember that feeling because you kind of, I don't know about you, but growing up, like everything was kind of set. Like I knew after high school, you go to college. Once you go to college, you get a job. And then once you get a job, then it's kind of blank, like you kind of have to define your legacy, figure it out. So everything up until that point, I knew at this point you do this, at this point you do this. So, getting a job, I'm like, wow, this is a start to, me figuring out who I am, what I want to do. And so I definitely remember that day. And then I texted my mom, like, I'm out. I'm in LA. She's like, no, you're not. I'm like, oh, I got a job. And she's just like,
oh yeah, I mean, you probably should have started with that. Like, yeah, I got a job.
Parents say that. They're like, all right, well, if you get a job, you can do it. You can go. And then you get the job. They're like, oh, she was serious.
So you are one thing that I've learned about big cities and stuff, like it's one thing to like get an internship there. It's one thing to go on vacation, but then it's another thing to actually live there, right? So being fresh off getting ready to graduate from college, were you nervous at all to move to a bigger city like LA?
Yeah. I was lucky that I had some close friends from college that were from LA that were going home. So one of my closest friends, her and I actually met in college. And most of my close friends to this day are all people that I met before I got here. So, but definitely nervous being away from my family. I don't think you realize, even being in Boston, when you know that they're so close, and then dealing with the time difference, that's probably been the biggest adjustment, I would say. Because your friends forget you live across the country and call you at 5 a.m. when they think it's 8. or not hearing from anybody after like 9 o'clock
Mm,
Pacific time, midnight, and everybody's sleeping. So definitely were some homesickness and adjustments. And then the way that they portray LA, you just never really know. They're like, everyone's
right.
fake. You got to be on your P's and Q's at all times and blah, blah, blah. And I would
Mm,
say, it's like any other place. You just got to
mm.
adjust. The gas is way, way
Oh
higher.
my God. Yeah.
The gas will have you never wanting to come back.
Yeah, ever again. Ever again.
In Connecticut, people complain when it's like 285 or something.
Yeah, you
I mean,
guys
try
are like,
$5. Try
yeah,
$5.
that's pretty crazy. Especially because I mean it's gas, it's something you have to, use every day. So that's like
Yeah,
it's not convenient.
yeah,
But even, talking about that, the adjustments, right? So I think a lot of young people, when you're chasing a dream and stuff, it always like sounds good, but there's some, obstacles or adjustments that you have to make. And it sounds like one of yours was moving to a different city in a completely different environment. So how was that? Just the idea of balancing that. You're striving for something that you really wanted to accomplish, but at the same time, you had to, in a way, leave behind a lifestyle that you were pretty much accustomed to.
right. I would say it definitely was stepping out of my comfort zone, but I would say I was never really nervous. I always knew it would kind of work out for itself. But I think the biggest adjustment besides location switch, I always say this, like in college, you're surrounded by your friends and people that have like kind of similar goals to you, like you all are, aiming to graduate. But then when you graduate and you go onto your job, you're you're just kind of a little more isolated than you had been. Like I was just used to being around more people all the time, that we all went to eat at the same time or we all did this at the same time. So the adjustment of these new friends I have, I don't really know them.
Mm,
I'm just meeting these people. I don't know if we like the same things. It's just, I think I was very comfortable being surrounded by so many people that I was pretty familiar with at that point. So just being more open to new relationships, and then obviously the bias of like LA, like everyone's fake. You're like you got to make sure do background checks or whatever. Um, so I would say definitely just finding a core group of friends was one of the most important things for me to do when I got here, and also probably one of the challenges.
mm. What would you
Yeah.
say, if you could, to someone who might be hesitant to take that jump? Because it sounded as if like you were ready for that moment. Like you didn't think twice. Hell, you applied for it. But for some people, when they get to that last, like final decision, like, all right, I got the job, I applied and all that, but now I really have to like move. What would you say to someone who might think twice about really, taking that next step?
Um, it's a great question. I always tell people you just got to go. My whole thing was, okay, you have no kids, no severe bills, debt, like if
Yeah.
there's ever a time to go, it's now for me at least. There was nothing really tying me to staying in Connecticut or in like the Northeast except for my family. And with FaceTime, I mean, I talk to my family every day, every single day. So um, I think for me, it was kind of like, if not now, when? Because I could
Mm,
see, I pictured myself going back to Connecticut, you know, staying, getting a job, saving up, but then when would be the right point after that?
mm,
And so for me, it was kind of a personal sacrifice, to instead of, they say some people, or what's the best way of phrasing this? I've I got comfortable with the idea that my paychecks were to live, not to save. Like some people want to save and then live comfortably. Like me, I accepted that, you know what, you're gonna have to like kind of struggle and do just check to check and just
mm,
make it work. And I
mm,
think that if you just accept that in the beginning, you work harder to get yourself out of that situation. Like my personal goal for this year is to live in an apartment that has washer and dryer in unit and park. Like that is my, like, it sounds so crazy, but I'm like, living in LA is expensive. So it's like
Mm,
I just have to make certain sacrifices that I would never make if I were home.
mm.
But
But
we're
this,
gonna
but
manage.
this is all a part of it though, right? Like I think,
Right.
like I said before, like, you know, on social media and everywhere you look, like people like to talk about the glamour behind, reaching a certain level, but the sacrifices that you have to make, especially like you said, living in LA, right? Like
Right.
that's, you know, but I think a good point that you made too is like, if not now, when? Like when you're
Right.
young, like you can take all the risks in the world. Like you
Like,
can afford to lose.
like I don't have any kids, no
Yeah,
pets.
no pets.
Like I'm my own person. I think once I'm older and I want to settle down and have a family, then I would consider, moving to a place that I think is more family friendly. LA, I
Mm,
don't think it. The
right, right.
outskirts and the valley, they are. Um, but yeah, no, definitely made some sacrifices. And even you like pointing out social media, I tell people all the time, like, I'm only going to ever post highlights. Why would I post, like, you know what I mean? Why would people post the most depressing parts of their day? Or, like, I don't. So for me, it's like, you cannot compare yourself to social media. That's like, and that's the worst part because you see people and you think everything's supposed to happen like this. And you're supposed to be balling and dressed, going to all these places. But it's not the real world.
Yeah.
People only
Do,
show that.
do, yeah. Do you think that's a popular thing in LA? Or also just among young people in general? Do you think that's a popular thing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think people really only show the best of themselves, and then show the worst of themselves when they're super vulnerable or
Mm,
upset. So I think it kind of skews your idea of reality that everything's just supposed to happen. And then nowadays, there are a lot of young people that are entrepreneurs and just, even like TikTok, like people are rich off of TikTok.
right.
So everybody has their own path, and you really just gotta stay focused and like look at your own set goals.
Mm,
Obviously, sometimes you're gonna see stuff and be like, "Damn, I wish I could do that," or "I wish
right,
I
right,
could
right,
have."
right.
That's normal.
Mm,
Um, but you got to make sure your own goals are like always clear.
yeah. But though, going off of talking about goals and the journey to where you are now, let me ask you, do you feel like, you ever felt lost at any point? Like you didn't have a sense of direction?
Yeah, I mean, I would say at this point, I know I would love to be a music agent. I think I'd be really good at it, but it wasn't overnight. And I was kind of like, I don't know what's next for me. Especially like the whole pandemic, like it just slowed everything down. And, everybody started, doing psychoanalysis of themselves. And
Mm,
I'm just, I don't know what's next. I say this all the time. I don't know where I'll be in 5 years. I don't have an idea. I just hope that all the hard work I'm putting in will like show and prove. Because I always say like I would love to be a music agent, but one of my goals is to go on tour with an artist. I don't know how that would happen in what capacity, but that's just something I know I'd love to do, to travel the world. Um, but yeah, I definitely feel lost all the time because
mm,
sometimes you're by, like I said, sometimes I just feel very isolated here,
mm.
um, away from my family. I have great friends here, but I'm not with them every day. And yeah, definitely feel lost sometimes. But
Yeah,
I
I
always
mean,
feel like
that's real.
hindsight, whenever I was lost, I made it work in a way I probably wouldn't have if it was just handed to me,
Mm,
if that makes sense. Like I
yeah.
feel like it took me digging deeper to figure out why I felt like this, to maybe have uncomfortable conversations with people or like my boss, um, things that I probably wouldn't have done otherwise.
Mm. But you mentioned that you may not know where you'll be 5 years from now, right? Nobody does, right? Of course. But think about it this way, right? Like, so 5 years ago, right, when you were in school, did you
Mhm.
think that you would be where you are now?
Not at all.
So see, that's so you never know where you're gonna be 5 years from now.
I agree.
So do you ever kind of allow like the thoughts of like your future self, like where you'll be, years from now to kind of influence your decision making of, now? Or are you more like you know, I'm living for today?
Um, no, I would say I'm spontaneous at times, but I'm not more like, I take it day by day. I'm too much of
Right.
like an overthinker,
Mm.
for being honest. Um, yeah, that's a good question. It's a really great question, honestly. I have to think about that one.
Yeah, I mean, so always, saying stuff like that. There's obviously no right or wrong answer. But I think it's kind of cool when people can kind of do a little bit of both. If having that balance of like, living life to the fullest, but also understanding that I have a short term as well as a long term goal that, I'm, you're really trying to accomplish, you know?
Yeah, I would say surface level for that, because I think that's a much deeper question than the answer I'm about to give you. It's kind of been navigating the entertainment industry and also, trying to have a personal social life in LA.
Mhm.
Because working in music, it's funny, like the people I could work with via email are the same people I'd see at the club. So,
Yeah.
just, and as a woman, in the music industry, the way we communicate affects the way we're perceived, and the way we're perceived affects the way we're talked about.
Mhm.
So I would say surface level, like definitely try to understand how my actions now could affect me later, and just trying to find like the balance of work and personal, especially,
Yeah.
trying to network in LA, networking at events where I see the same people all the time, just trying to get relationships that way.
Got you.
Um,
Got you. Got you. Yeah.
but I would
And
It's definitely an adjustment because working at an agency versus with musicians that don't always operate on a corporate system, it's kind of a weird balance because all my emails are super formal,
mm,
signature included, but we're working with artists who maybe aren't used to that format. They don't care. They rather just text you, and send you messages like easier than me being like,
yeah.
can you please follow up on email? So I um, so yeah, it's definitely taken an adjustment, and I'm still learning every day, trying to make sure I meet the right people. And then obviously I'm an overthinker, so like say the right thing and
Mm.
you know, all that.
Right. So what would you say a day in the life of Greer Davis is like?
Uh a typical day, I would say I wake up early. I wake up around 7. That's usually when I'll try to talk to my friends back home, like early in the morning.
Yeah, I was gonna say too,
Talk
just
to
to be clear, this is 7 a.m. Pacific.
7 a.m. Pacific time,
Okay,
10 a.m. Eastern time.
got you.
Um, because usually I wake up to messages, but my friends usually know like I'm a few hours behind, or
Mm.
yeah, behind. And so I wake up, usually talk to my parents. They usually wake me up sometimes. Um, and then I work from home. I've been working from home since March of 2020.
Mm.
So I wake up, check emails. We have the mobile app on my phone, so I really kind of check emails from bed, just make sure there's nothing super urgent.
Mm.
And then I just kind of work off emails and just see. I'm not super by the computer every 5 seconds. So I do my work. In the background, it's always Undisputed.
Okay.
Because from the hours of 4 on my YouTube clips.
Hmm.
Podcast. I love Undisputed. I love Shannon Sharp.
Hmm.
But I watch everyone, kind of like Pat McAfee now. I
Hmm.
don't know. I just kind of like to hear what they're discussing and just keep it in the background.
Right.
I also like Joe Budden because I like music. So I listen to Joe Budden. I sometimes listen to academics when I'm trying to keep up
Oh.
with the younger.
Well, I mean, you
No,
mentioned TikTok too, so
how I find these artists.
yeah.
It's like the next artist I'm not gonna find on my Apple playlist because it's all these people like Drake. They don't need
Yeah.
an agent when they're just kind of figuring out who has the right outlets to like who's up next,
Yeah.
So
So
I do a lot.
is that a part of like what you do too, like trying to find out like who's up next kind of thing?
Right. So in an agency, like essentially to be when I would be promoted to a coordinator or a junior agent, it's because I had the ability to maybe sign some artists. So I'm always listening to music. I still go on SoundCloud. I don't know how many people do. I still go on SoundCloud all the time. Um, and Spotify playlists, scouring Instagram Explore pages. Um, and then what sometimes like when I go out and I see an artist and I see their management teams, I guess I hope this doesn't sound creepy, but if I know who the manager is, I'll go on his Instagram and then search through his followers just to see like other music names. Just try to familiarize
Right.
myself with other players in the industry, other
Mm,
artists that are upcoming. Because I've struggled trying to figure out ways to find new artists.
mm.
It's hard because in the agency space, you don't sign a client unless they're ready to go on tour. We don't deal with anything that has to do with music. We only deal with live shows.
Okay.
So it's like you have to have enough music to go out and do live shows. And then if
Yeah.
the labels are on, somebody's probably already watching. So
Yeah. Yeah. When you talk about tours and shows, I feel like that's definitely probably been a hassle considering COVID and so how's
exactly.
that? I mean, I know you say you've been working from home now for nearly 2 years, but how's that process been? Just the idea of like, you know,
I would say it was really cool to see how, different groups adjusted, like the whole virtual shows for universities. Like a ton of universities had virtual shows, like Brown, um, I think Yale might have had one. There's just like a bunch, countless schools had virtual shows preset. So an artist could either perform live with their band or they
mhm,
could pre-record. So I just thought that was a great way for the artist to still,
that's
make some
crazy.
money during the, yeah. I was like, I could see my girls and I, had maybe a wine night and like Ari
That's
Lennox.
crazy.
We're all quarantined for the next year. So it's
That's a real. I mean, I knew like with club quarantine or quarantine radio or something like that. Like a lot of, and obviously versus like a lot of that's happened, but I
yeah,
didn't know they were like you know. I, mean, I guess it makes sense if they're doing it on Instagram. So like, is it done like through Zoom or like?
yeah, yeah. A lot of times you could pre-record and then maybe they present it through Zoom. I'm not sure. I wasn't always on, but then I know we did a show with like Ari Lennox and JID, and they also had a meet and greet. So they did a meet and greet like on Zoom. Yeah.
That's tough. I mean, like that, but that's the world we're in now.
I feel like it probably brightened some faces, just talk to Ari Lennox on Zoom, which I thought was so cool. I know one of the clients at ICM is Lil Yachty. And he did like a paint class with like he was, I don't know, he like they added him to the Zoom and he like did the class with like the students. So there was
Yeah,
just a ton of different things that artists were doing, to encourage the kids or just,
and to
different
pass the
things.
time and just all that. Yeah,
Right. People create, they want to show their art. So
right. But that's kind of cool though, to kind of be able to experience someone be a part of um something like that. It's like the world we're in now is definitely different and unique. I'm sure if we were even consider or talk about this 10 or even 5 years ago, it would sound crazy. Like who the hell is going to, a virtual conference? But like talk to me too what that means, right? Making the adjustments to the world we're in now and like, dealing with clients more virtual, now more than ever.
right. Yeah, I would say it's definitely been an adjustment now that festivals, excuse me, and concerts are starting to come back. It's a lot more, vaccine requirements, just like the sports games these days. They just want to show proof of vaccination and ID. Now they want both. Um, and just making sure like these shows are safe, obviously, is a priority. But I would say that's probably the best perk of my job is that, I get to go to shows and be a part of um, these artists' careers. I would say as a assistant to a talent agent, my main job is to make sure that money is received on time.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is, I would say, my most important role, to make sure that everyone money is coming in on time and being distributed on time.
Mm, mm.
That's
So how does that? I mean, obviously, that's always top tier level of importance. But how does that work?
So primarily, like, agents will book shows through different buyers. It could be a buyer like Live Nation, or it could be, Rolling Loud for, the festivals.
Mm,
But, making sure deposits are on the schedule that's on the contract. And so just making sure, because as an agent, you're dealing with the artists and the management teams. Like, that's none of your concern. So as an assistant,
mm,
it's like kind of my role to make sure that everything that he set up is being executed. So if that
mm.
means following up with buyers, like, hey, we were expecting this deposit yesterday, or this show already played, where's the funds?
Where's the money?
Show me the money. Yes.
Yeah, facts.
Yeah. So I would say it's just really being comfortable following up. I tell people, like, my main job, I'm like the follow-up queen, like kindly following up. And people are so annoying, right? I'm like,
Mm,
no. It's helpful that, that somebody could see again, like, people, how many times we probably open texts or emails and we're like, okay, I'm gonna get right back to this.
but
And
they
then we
don't.
just, right, they just fall into something else. People are just really, really busy. So it's like, no, you gotta follow up queen, kindly following up.
Mm, mm.
Hope you're well. Kindly
Add that in there. Add that in there. Hope you're well, but you owe me some money.
yeah, you gotta be comfortable being a little annoying,
Mm,
but it's making it easier for me to have tougher conversations, just in general in life. I feel like I've never really a confrontational person. Like, I'm more of a, like, very relaxed, reserved,
mm.
and maybe hold it in until it's too late.
Right.
But
Got you.
kind of, speak right, like, when I see something, speak on it. If I mess up, own up to it. Don't try to
Mm,
fix it yourself. I would say that's probably one of my biggest fears, was messing up.
mm.
I don't know, like, from typos. Like, I didn't want to do anything that I was just like a fireable offense.
Right.
You're just scared to mess up. Sometimes you don't know if it's your place, if it's not your place to do certain
Yeah.
things. So, just being comfortable, like, I always say, it's better to say, like, oh, I'm sorry I did too much, than to do too little. That's kind of
Mm,
the approach I've taken. I guess it's better in some situations than others. But I'm like, at least they know I care. I'm thinking about this, like, I'm on top of it, as opposed to them saying, like, you just let that dangle. So
yeah, like you wasn't about to say anything, but but I mean, that's very, very true too. It's like, especially when you're kind of relatively new to like an industry or a job or whatever, it's like, do you feel the need to like tiptoe and make sure, that you don't do anything wrong, and that, you make sure that you're still employed.
right,
Because with a position like that, obviously it's a serious one, and you want to make sure that you don't do anything crazy. Um,
right.
but let me ask, and all the networking that you've done, all the people that you met, would you say that there's a good amount of people that have their degrees, like a good amount of people that have gone to college? I mean, if
Um,
like, I mean, nowadays that doesn't really come up in conversation. Like, do you have your,
it,
bachelor's?
wait,
But
there's a mix. There's a
mm,
mix, especially
mm,
dealing with artists and their teams, because a lot of times these are people that, they either grew up with them or they're very close to them. And then there's some artists, like, J. Cole, for example. He met his manager Eve at St. John's. Like, they just, they grew up together
mm,
at school. But then there's some artists that are 18 and their managers, they just, so everybody, it's a wide range. I would say on the corporate side of, like, people I work with, those are mostly people with degrees. But then there are some instances, like older agents, they started off as a label, as an intern, and then they were so good at their job, they were, recruited to be an agent, and they maybe didn't go to college. But
mm,
I would say most of the people I work with directly have gone to college. And that excludes the artists and their teams. I'm not
mm,
really too sure. But I just know the people that I'm surrounded with are typically they typically have degrees, especially like all the assistants, most of the assistants, some of them are older, but a lot of them are straight out of college.
Mm.
Because they say
Okay.
like working at these entertainment grad school,
Oh, okay. Entertainment grad.
right?
Okay, gotcha.
So
Yeah.
I went as an assistant because I want to be an agent, but there are a lot of people at agencies who they want to go work at Netflix, but they just need a year of agency experience in
Mm.
order to, then move on to different places. So
Yeah.
it's like, I would say maybe like 20%, 30% want to be agents, assistants want to be agents,
Mm.
and the rest are just, putting in their time, just trying to
Right.
learn the industry.
Mm. That's usually how it is, ironically enough. In order to get a job, you need experience. And in order to, the experience, you need a job. So it's like it's kind of, a flip-flop um situation. But another point that you made that I want to touch on too was um the SoundCloud part and like following certain people on Instagram. And I think a good point that can be made with that is that like you never really know, I guess from an artist perspective or anyone out there, you never really know who's like paying attention
Yeah.
to your stuff, right? Whether it be music, sports, or whatever. So just posting like your stuff can be very, very viable. But have you ever discovered like someone maybe, you know, like just through whichever app it was, right? SoundCloud, Instagram, where it's like, wow, I never knew that they were putting out this type of content. This is, pretty dope. Like someone that you may have, never heard from before.
Um, I'm trying to think. I can't give you an answer at the moment,
Mm.
but I think back to experiences I've had with artists that are now like megastars. For
Mm.
example, I heard The Weekend. I want to say I was like in fifth grade or seventh, between fifth and seventh grade on Tumblr. You know what I mean? I was just a little right. I was
Wow.
just a little more and same for like artists like Party Next Door and Kalani. I saw them as like a Tumblr couple. And that's why I say like I watch academics to really stay in tune with the younger generation because I feel like they kind of set the tone for the music industry because they're the ones that are finding these artists on these SoundClouds or
Mm.
TikTok these days. Um, so I can't remember that, but I remember being a fan of The Weeknd for years before he popped. And then, they take off and you're like, see, I know I have the sound. I know the sound. I know what it like
Mm.
a star sounds like. But as I've gotten older, it's hard for me to kind of find those outlets now. Like I don't go on SoundCloud every day, but there are certain days I'll go on trending and just, listen around. But for
Mm.
the most part, I still want to hear like Drake, Nothing Was the Same. Like I'm like, oh no,
Mm.
like I'm turning into like my parents, like listen to
No,
the same
no, that is, I
album.
mean, that's, it's a classic tape. So I mean, it's not like it's a classic one. So yeah, you're definitely good. Um, yeah, do you think too, within the music industry as a whole, but also specifically to LA, that like there's a lot of competition, maybe not necessarily just for artists, but for people that are trying to land an opportunity in that area?
Oh, definitely, definitely. It's also kind of hard to know who is who.
Mm.
I would say there are a lot of people in LA that flex. Like you would think that they're the CEO of Rock Nation if you leave it up to them. It's like actually like nobody knows what you do.
Mm.
I tell people all the time, like LA is the first city I've lived in outside of really Connecticut and Boston, but never have I ever been to a place where so many people don't work. But like, you know what I mean? You'll get invited to 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, and I'm like, no, that's the end of my lunch break, actually. Like these people that seem so well connected, you never really know unless you are really within those circles, what they do. So for me, I always try to find people on LinkedIn, just try to like, do my research as much as I can. But no, these people are super competitive um, to be with the top people, surrounded by the top people. I mean, everybody wants to be famous in LA.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
And
really what it comes down to in some
But
capacity, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. They don't want to be famous for being, loud or whatever. They want to be famous for putting on a great artist, or they want to, share their art with the world. Like, it's not a
mhm.
bad thing to say they want to be famous.
Right, right. Of course not. I mean, especially too in that city. I mean, like a good amount of people that are famous live in LA and Hollywood in that area. So I
Right.
mean, it makes sense. But that's funny though. You mentioned like like what are y'all are doing at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday? It's like,
A
but I
pool
mean,
party.
yeah. But I mean that's inspiring. Just the idea of like being that, some sort of
See, I
scheduling
hope
is just like
one day, if everything in a few years, I hope I can have myself set up where I can throw a party at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. So,
hey, you just might.
right.
I mean, like, and I mean, being in that area is probably no better place to do it. I mean, it's no, but all right. So how is that though? Like, because like we both know that that's not common around the country or the world, but just seeing that other people in the city of Los Angeles have the ability and time freedom to just move that way often enough. It's not like that in every city or state in the world. So how is that you know been for you? How do you what's your thoughts and things on that?
I would say at first it was very shocking, to be honest. I'm like, what is going on? Like, people really just dirty all day, like,
Donnie.
and some people, right? But I would say what I've learned just living here is that there are a lot of people who get it done in various ways. There are a lot of, like, aspiring actors. So you could go sit and be like, you could be in the audience on The Voice and you get paid. So, people are just doing jobs that aren't typical 9 to 5s, but still pay. You could go be an extra and that you can make a lot of money. Or if you're like an influencer, you're doing all these people just get it a different way. And I think in a little larger of scale.
Yeah, I mean you have to. As you mentioned, LA isn't cheap, but just like I mean that to me that's pretty cool though.
Yeah.
It's I think that's pretty cool though. Just the idea that like people are getting it. However,
Right.
it's like
Paid to sit on, I don't know, like The Masked Singer, and you're
mm,
there all day and you just took home 250, 300. I mean, so people are
why
just
not do
doing,
anything? Yeah.
yeah, people are doing just jobs that I would say growing up in Connecticut, I just didn't even knew it. Like, I didn't know that they existed.
Mm.
Like, I didn't know you had to sit in the audience. Obviously, it's not like Ellen where they're like,
Mm.
you gotta get those, right? But they genuinely need people like in the audience to participate, extras for movies because there's a ton of sets um, in studios all over.
Mm.
Um, yeah, there's just I think that there are more jobs that aren't 9 to 5, and you're like, at first you're like, does anybody work? And then you realize, oh, they work this week and racked up, and now they're good for the next month.
It's like that though. I mean, like you said, everyone has a different lifestyle, and that city is, a different breed. But I guess recapping it and talking about, your entire story, going back to your days in college where it kind of all started, from you, picking up a magazine, um, and just the idea of getting an offer after your, internship and it really working out for you, and then, moving out to LA, and just dealing with the good and bad things that come with that, and still making it work. And so I say all that, provide people the timeline and context, because that leads me to the final question that I have for you, and that's a question that I ask everyone that comes on to define your legacy. That question is, how do you want to be remembered?
Oh, that's a nice, that's a nice finale. Um, I would like to be remembered by like the people closest to me for being someone that always was there for them and could always provide for the people closest for me. Like where I see myself, I always envision myself being so comfortable that I can make everyone around me comfortable. And so I just want to be remembered as somebody who, first and foremost, was a good person, was a kind person. I don't try, I'm usually very friendly. And because I've learned that there are a lot of people that go through a lot of things in silence that you don't always know. So being a good person, sometimes even just being nice and friendly, you don't even know it could be making somebody's day. So first and foremost, to be a good person, to be someone that always gave back to their community. Um, and yeah, to make sure that everyone around me was comfortable and taken care of.
Mm, that's real.
And then if
You know,
I'm amazing at my job and, could leave a legacy for my family and continue my career in music, that all would be an extra bonus. But first and foremost, I just want to make sure that at the end of the day, my family is taken care of and comfortable.
right. And I'm sure, your family and community is definitely proud of you and everything that you're doing, especially like I said, with the whole story. And also too, it sounded like it was a quick story. Like everything kind of happened relatively quickly, right? Going from your senior year until now, which
Yeah.
I think is pretty cool to hear.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Wait, I don't mean to cut you off,
no,
but
no, you go ahead.
just sometimes I think that when things happen to you in a period of time really quickly, it makes you think that everything should feel like that almost. And I would say since I've started my job, this is kind of like the longest amount of time where I've
Mm,
not been too sure of what's next. Like everything else, like I said, it just kind of fell into place. I was just meeting the right people, networking with the right people, saying the right things, doing the right things. And now it's kind of like I still don't really know what's next for me. Um, and I've just become comfortable with that. Not overnight. There are many nights where I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I don't even know a year from now. And like I told you, my company, ICM, was just acquired by CAA. So that's an anticipated merger in the next probably 90 days to who knows.
mm,
So I don't know where that'll leave me. Will I go to CAA?
right.
Would I go to agency? So a lot of things I'm just letting the cards slap
Play
where
like
they
you just yeah, right,
yeah,
right, right,
whatever happens, like,
right.
and that's not something I'm typically comfortable with, but I think after time and just, trusting on all the hard work I've put in so far, all the connections I've made, I know I'll be okay. And so for me right now, that's good enough.
Mm. Well, again, we talked about it, before the idea of being able to take risks. If there is
Yeah.
ever a time to do that, it's when you're young. When you get to a certain point in your life, it gets harder and harder to take risks that you can't really afford to take somebody else. So I definitely understand that. But first thing first, again, thank you for being on the show. I think I speak on behalf of everyone that's going to listen to this episode. It's definitely a good one. But if you don't mind, where could people find you? If you want, whether it's dropping your social or email or wherever it
Yeah.
is that
You could follow me on LinkedIn, or I don't know, add me on LinkedIn, Greer
Yeah,
Davis. You could add me on Instagram. That's XOXO Greer. I guess I should make that a little more professional as I'm older. Now saying it out loud, I might. Yeah, I would say those are best places if anyone really wants to connect or
Mm,
looks for any opportunities at agencies. They're available in LA, New York, and now everything's kind of remote. So I feel
yep,
like people who normally wouldn't be open to maybe moving right away, you could try it out, see what you like.
mm,
Those people, if you reach out to me on Instagram, I can send you my email. Um,
for sure,
yeah, I'm
for sure.
always big on networking. So if there's anybody you see I follow or anything like that, I'm always down to, network people. I feel like that is the best karma.
Mm,
Like I feel like when you can connect someone with somebody that like those are the ways you receive it back. I don't know.
mm,
So
yeah,
a lot
that's
of people.
real. I mean, again, especially like a city like LA, where it really is a who kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
networking in big cities like that. Because at the end of the day, just like a big college, you're almost just a number. Like you kind of become just a statistic. And
Right.
the more people the better off it's going to be for you and your overall career. But yeah, so I mean, do you have any final words from our audience? Anything that you want to say to kind of leave the people with?
I feel like I've said a lot. I probably talked way too much, but no, I would just say just follow your dreams. Just know that sometimes things don't always go as planned, and the best way to fix that is to just adjust. And always speak things into existence. That's one of the things I'm working on for myself. Sometimes I'm like the first person being, that's not gonna happen. I'm like, I can't even, I need to stop saying things like that. So I'm only manifesting positive thoughts. So.
Mm. And you said that earlier. I don't know if you were recording at the time, but you said like the word of the year for you was manifestation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's real. Sometimes you gotta speak things into existence. But yeah. So on the Define Legacy front, again, follow the podcast wherever you listen. All right, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, follow on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, everywhere. All right. And again, feel free to check out the online store and the link in the description of this episode. All right. And just like that, y'all, we gone. Stay blessed. Peace.